Sorry about that, and we're gonna try that one more fucking time.
I spent all my years in believing you, but I just can't get no relief, Lord. Somebody talk to my phone. Find me. Somebody talk to my phone. Find me. Somebody talk to my phone.
Bon locale, everyone, and welcome. I'm so sorry about the technical problems to start the show, but we are here and the sound is fixed. I don't know why it fucked up like that. It should not have. All my sound settings were set up and running and perfect at the beginning of the show, and then suddenly they just stopped working. What an utter fucking bother. But no worries, we're just going to keep on moving, keep on going with the show. And today's show is going to start with a bit of a special message because this is going to be the last time I'm doing a 2.5 hour show on Saturday only. Instead, I'm going to be doing my streams Monday through Saturday for about 30 minutes to an hour at a time. I know it's shorter, but given the limitations of my computer, it keeps on fucking crashing. I can't be doing any actual real video editing. So instead, I'm going to do a daily news show at 7 p.m. Monday through 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Saturday. Monday through Friday is going to be about the stories of the day, and Saturday is going to be more about talking with the audience and spending time with y'all, as well as responding to comments left on the videos throughout the week regarding the news. In addition to that, I've felt really fucking bad about having basically stopped my charity work. Right? I mean, a lot of people have told me it's understandable that I have, that my health comes first. And with my health concerns, which are still well up in the air, I can't afford insurance or to even pay my hospital bills, so I can't really visit the doctor until I pay back these bills, which are, I have one for $1,100, another for $950, and they just won't see me until I pay it. So I'm kind of in a catch-22 with that. But if I'm gonna die, and if my channel is going to die, it's gonna go down with me doing what I believe in the most. Helping homeless men and making sure everyone is well informed on the news and all that it entails. So I'm gonna start marketing, advertising for different men's shelters in the United States and Canada, and if I can find them in Europe. Although I've had a hell of a time even looking for men's shelters in Europe. And this week's men's shelter is the Salvation Army Men's Shelter in Manatee County, Florida. The Salvation Army Men's Shelter houses 110 men providing 24-hour emergency services, work and employment programs, veterans programs, as well as aid for those leaving prison and needing transitory assistance. Due to the limitations of state funding for men's shelters, especially in Florida, the shelter charges $10 a night for anyone who stays longer than 7 days, so it's not a long-term solution shelter. However, they will still provide day services and work and employment services to anyone who comes during the day. And I really think if we're able to start donating to them, they might be able to shave that $10 a night fee down. So if you look in the description box below, the first link available will take you to the Manatee County Men's Shelter page, and you can donate directly through there. Make sure to state that this is for the men's shelter. If you do make a donation, and if we can get enough people donating to this program, we might be able to see them offering more time for homeless men to get on their feet than just a week. That said, bon locale, and welcome to another episode of 7 at 7, my bizarre and technical problem-laden show at times. the least watched name in news, and I'm so glad to have you all here. It's so very wonderful that you've all shown up here. I mean, this is already, I've got more people watching than I normally do in the first 10 minutes of the show, so thank you all so much. Today's show is going to be slightly different. We've got to talk about some very important things regarding the last week in American politics. Normally, I would start the show with a news article that I find funny or interesting. Unfortunately, I didn't find much that was funny or interesting this week. I did find one story, however, that pissed me the hell off, and at the very last fucking second, I had to go out of my way to find a second source for this story, because the Agence France Presse fucked me over by deleting their article about this story. However, it's something I've been talking about a little bit with some people, and that is that the Paris Men's Fashion Week this week opened with shows depicting men as pigs and dogs. This upsets me so very fucking much. On Wednesday, the main chunk of the show commenced with two collections by Julian David and Walter van Beirendonck, forgive me if I mispronounced that, having their models go out on stage wearing dog and pig masks at their designer's behest. Julian David described it as a study of male types, and he and Walter van Beirendonck said that they were trying to stop people from paying attention to men's characters and instead wanted to bring focus onto the clothes. However, this is outright disgusting to me. Had they asked a woman to wear a dog mask on stage, there would be an enormous backlash by feminists. And it just goes to show the double standard that men see in the world, especially in the fashion world. It made me think a lot about the fact that despite the fact that men have been sexually harassed and even assaulted as models and have come out in the Me Too movement, no one talks about those stories and only wants to focus on the women. Likewise, this story gets almost no press except for what I was able to find on RFI. So let's go to the story. Paris Men's Fashion Week began in earnest on Wednesday with two collections depicting men as dogs and pigs, as the industry reels from a new sexual harassment scandal. French designer Julian David sent out his models wearing dogs' heads, from a macho, man-spreading Doberman to an intellectual whippet and a splayed poodle in dungarees. I wanted to study the human species with a bit of distance. It's a bit of a human laboratory, he told the French news agency AFP of his show, and of course AFP has done away with that article because they gave a lot of praise to Julian David and Walter van, I can't even say his last name. Yet as David put the final touches on his study of male types, including the very predatory-looking German Shepherd with his tongue hanging out, little did he know that the fashion world would be hit by new allegations that two-star photographers had harassed a string of models. Later, a show by Flemish master Walter van Beirendonck presented men as pigs. He let out his quirky collection with a litter of pig men, in seeming allusion to France's answer to the Me Too campaign, balance ton porc, squeal on your pig. With the little pig ears sticking out of their hoods and strategically placed holes over the erogenous zones, the outfits took a dark and world-weary take on the male condition. This article is just painful for me to fucking read, because the male condition here they're talking about is the idea that all men are rapists and monsters. Something that I strongly disagree with, and is very much without evidence. They're trying to pin this on all men, and they're painting men as dogs and pigs in the most blatant way, in one of the few places where men have a place in a female-dominated industry. It's offensive, and it's downright fucking disgusting, if you ask me. One-eyed monster, Dream Daddy, Pig, read one of his skin-colored, skin-tight tops, worn with leather breeches and braces. But David said his canine imagery was more about concentrating on the clothes, and said his dog's heads were about shifting the emphasis away from the models and onto his eclectic style. When you look at the dog, you don't pay attention to his character, and this is the part I really wanted to read, and I wanted to have the same feeling here. If that guy was on the top, was a real person, you would assume a lot of things about him, he said. Instead, and this is me talking, he wanted to present them as the feminist movements, and especially Me Too, has painted all men as dogs and pigs. It's absolutely fucking heart-wrenching to see this, especially with the work that I've done with male prostitutes and female prostitutes alike, in which male prostitutes are very often beaten within an inch of their lives. I've had to take a male prostitute to the hospital in Vancouver, Canada, because his lover, his John, was not happy with the service he provided and felt guilty about sleeping with another man. And in turn, all I saw was his black eye, the bruises all over his body, and the shame on his face. It really fucking hurt. I'm so sorry about that, but I'm so sorry to share that story with you, but it really fucking hurts to see this kind of stuff. And at this point, I would hope we would be beyond such vapid attempts to minimize men in any way, especially in an industry which is already completely dominated by women. I just wanted to get that story out there because no one's talking about it. There's a few people in France talking about it, and I had to actually go out of my way to find that copy of the article because AFP deleted theirs. Like, literally, I went to open up the link and I could not find it for the life of me, and it really fucking upset me. However, there's some stories that I need to cover out the gate, some very important stories. First up, we're going to be discussing the government shutdown in the United States. Of course, this would be the 18th shutdown of the government since 1976. And 1976 being when the federal budget process was changed in order to create a system where spending gaps would be implemented in place of running at a deficit. This was a large part of what Carter fought against in his presidential run. However, what we ended up seeing, at least until the Reagan era, was there was no service gaps. There was no shutdown of essential and non-essential services during that time. It wasn't until the Reagan administration and the very heated partisan battles that took place in that time that we see shutdowns causing this kind of thing. Now, if you're wondering, a government shutdown refers to the shuttering and furloughing of non-essential government agencies and employees. And again, there have been 18 government shutdowns since 1976, 44 years of it being the process by which we do this. The last government shutdown was in 2013, in September of 2013, and it lasted all of 16 days. But there are no actual hard laws defining what is shutdown and what is not. There are some definitions of what is essential. For example, the military is always considered an essential service. Immigrations and Customs is considered an essential service. There are a few other things. Congress still gets paid, for example. The president would normally get paid, however, Donald Trump has opted to not be paid and instead have his check donated to charity. So that's one positive. Most agencies that Unfortunately, not all agencies work off of the yearly budget that we're seeing a shutdown over right now, and that is what it comes down to. Because the budget was made the subject of the Dreamers Act, and Chuck Schumer and the Senate Democrats were insistent on fighting against this bill unless it funded the Dreamers Act. Of course, the Dreamers being children who were born in the United States or brought into the United States by their parents as immigrants, being protected from deportation and funded for assistance. What we saw in the last number of days has been quite a problem for everyone, absolutely. But I wanted to take the time to explain to you just what would and would not be being shut down, as most agencies still hold an operating budget from the last fiscal year, as well as the last fiscal quarter, excuse me. They will remain open, many of which with skeleton crews, whereas routine inspections and data generating services within the government will cease for the duration of the shutdown. For example, the Office of Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, as well as the Mine Health and Safety Administration, MHSA, whose duties are nearly completely focused on routine inspections of companies and mines, respectively, will be shut down. The Food and Drug Administration will be furloughing 42% of its staff. The Center for Disease Control will be furloughing 63% of its staff, though they will continue working on the flu and flu surveillance. The National Institutes of Health will have to furlough 77% of their staff. The Environmental Protection Agency will continue operations for one more week in accordance with their standing budget, but afterwards will be furloughing upwards of 95% of their staff. The Securities and Exchange Commission, as well as the U.S. Commodity Futures Trading Commission, will furlough 90% of its staff. The Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, will be furloughing about 50% of its staff. However, air traffic control will continue uninterrupted. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau reported earlier this week that it had an operating budget and was able to request $0 for the next 3 months and will remain at full capacity, much to many people's joy and many other people's chagrin. The national parks which take entry fees will remain open, as they are entirely funded by the tourism that comes in the gates. However, all others will be closed. The Smithsonian Museum and National Zoo will be remaining open today and tomorrow, but will be closed on Monday. They will, the National Zoo specifically, will have a very small staff to take care of the animals, and that will be the case for the length of the government shutdown. The Social Security Administration has to furlough quite a large number of employees. However, they haven't reported as of this time how many employees are to be furloughed. That said, Social Security checks will still go out if a bit delayed. The U.S. military is of course considered essential to national security, as well as the Customs and Border Protection Agency, as well as the Transport Security Agency. However, if the shutdown extends past February 1st for the military and February 9th for the CBPA and TSA, these government employees will be working without pay. Immigration and Customs Enforcement will remain on duty through the shutdown and follow the same pay schedule as the U.S. military. So if they continue, if this continues for more than 11 days, our Immigration and Customs Enforcement will be operating unpaid. And that's something important to remember for a story that I'm going to be talking about later regarding California. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services is funded entirely by the fees it charges applicants, and as such won't be shutting down. However, the Department of Labor would be closed, which means work visas will not be approved during this shutdown. Washington, D.C.'s services will remain functioning, though, unlike they were in 2013, due to Congress granting more autonomy to D.C.'s budgets. And I think this is the part that everyone is going to find the most upsetting. Tax refunds are going to be heavily delayed during the entirety of this government shutdown. So, unfortunately, most of the articles that I had found on the subject were deeply partisan, either going against Donald Trump in any way that they could and praising Obama as if that has anything to do with right now whatsoever. Which means that the only article that I actually found of any value was this PBS article of all things, PBS NewsHour article, which actually goes into fine detail about how many employees in each department that they're covering is going to be let out. To the article. Early Saturday morning, Congress failed to meet its own deadline to fund much of the federal government, sparking a shutdown. A budget shutdown affects agencies which depend on discretionary funds appropriated by Congress each year. Agencies which are automatically funded, mandatory spending, do not have to shut down. This includes most of the Social Security Administration, Medicare, and Medicaid. And of course, here's the major departments. Department of Commerce, 41,572 workers furloughed with only 6,324 remaining. Most of the agency will shut down, but NOAA will continue weather forecasting. The Patent and Trademark Office will remain open as it has independent revenue sources. The Department of Defense, in the Department of Defense, the active duty military remain on the job, however unpaid. This is important to note. They say unpaid. The military is paid once a month. All active duty soldiers are paid the first of the month, and that means that technically the military is paid up until February 1st. However, non-essential military services and civilian employees are being furloughed. The Department of Education is going to be ceasing most functionality, with 3,892 workers being furloughed, with only about 200 remaining. The EPA is furloughing 13,471, with 784 remaining on duty. Management of Superfund sites, which pose imminent health risks if unattended, will continue, but many other functions, including, as I mentioned before, the routine inspections will cease. The Department of Health and Human Services is going to be furloughing half of their workforce, with 40,959 workers furloughed and 40,956 remaining. Medicare and Medicaid will remain funded. Disaster, suicide, and substance abuse hotlines will remain open. The CDC is suspending its seasonal flu program. However, they are still remaining on flu surveillance. The FDA would suspend food and safety routine inspections, and funding ends to tribes and Indian health programs. The Department of Homeland Security, being a very important part of essential national security, is only furloughing 6,554 workers. Excuse me, 31,233 workers, while 241,385 remain. This is, of course, the TSA, the Border Protection, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, etc. New employee training is ended and travel is canceled. Department of Housing and Urban Development is furloughing 6,554 workers, with 1,243 remaining on the job. The Federal Housing Administration loan underwriting and approval program stops. Rental assistance applications will not be processed, and only key activities related to the safety or health of people will continue. The IRS is furloughing 45,489 workers, with 35,076 remaining on duty. Tax refunds will not be being issued at that time, and amended returns will not be processed during that time. Electronic tax processing continues, however, most of that is automated. NASA is furloughing 16,724 workers, with only 800 people remaining. Astronauts on the ISS would stay on the job, as would their support teams. Active satellites will continue to be monitored and supported, but public tours of the NASA facilities are suspended. The National Park Service and parks and trails will remain accessible, but no park programs or services will continue. Wildfire personnel will remain on the job. In the Office of the President, 1,056 workers are furloughed, with only 659 remaining, and it's not clear which functions precisely are affected there. And of course, we've covered the Smithsonian. Zoo animal cameras are going to be shutting down, which means people's, absolute favorite, the Panda Cam, is going to be inaccessible for at least the next 2 weeks. And staff responsible for protecting buildings or care of animals and lab projects will remain on duty. Of the Social Security Administration, 10,775 workers are furloughed, 52,461 remain. Payments will continue as normal, but no new or replacement Social Security cards will be processed. That actually poses a problem for me, unfortunately. The Department of Transportation is going to be furloughing 19,632 workers, with 34,928 remaining on duty. Air traffic control, hazardous material safety inspections, and rail accident investigations remain open. The aircraft registry and employee drug testing are suspended. And finally, the Department of Veteran Affairs is only furloughing 13,858 workers. The other 363,000 will remain on duty. All veterans' health and medical services will continue, but paperwork processing will be suspended. One reason that I wanted to, because this was a story that actually mattered, the reason that I brought up the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau specifically is because they have done something under Secretary Mulvaney that I've not seen in my lifetime. They are actually using the funds that they have from the previous allocation, which I believe accounts for $145 million in their coffers, in order to tell the U.S. government we need $0 for the coming 3 months. This was a decent story to find on Thursday, amidst all of the other chaos going on. This was something that impressed me because, let's face it, these government agencies go out of their way to, get whatever money they can to put as much of that tax dollar money in their fucking coffers as soon as the government makes it available. However, Mulvaney flipped the script and said, we don't need any money. We still have a ton of fucking money that we can use to make it through the next 3 months. From the story, every quarter, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau formally requests its operating funds from the Federal Reserve. Last quarter, former director Richard Condrey asked for $217 million. Condrey, an appointee of Barack Obama, only needed $86.6 million the quarter before that. And on Wednesday, President Donald Trump's acting CFPB director, Mick Mulvaney, sent his first request to the Fed. He requested $0. In a letter to Fed Chair Janet Yellen, obtained by Politico, Mulvaney wrote that the Bureau has $177 million in the bank, enough to cover the $145 million the Bureau has budgeted for its second quarter. Condrey has maintained a reserve fund in case of overruns or emergencies, but Mulvaney said he didn't see any reason for it, since the Fed has always given the Bureau the money it needs. Mulvaney, who is also Trump's budget director, noted that instead of advancing the funds to the Bureau, the Fed could return them to the Treasury and reduce the deficit. While the approximately $145 million may not make much of a dent in the deficit, the men and women at the Bureau are proud to do their part to be responsible stewards of taxpayer dollars. Now, this is something that I think every government agency should be doing. They should be finding ways to make sure that their coffers and all the excess funds that they have are put towards what is necessary, and everything else can be returned to the Fed and the, taxpayer need, as compared to overfunding as so many government agencies do. Reducing the deficit, by 145 million wouldn't be that much, but if every agency took this example, we would start seeing, billions of dollars. Because 145 million, if 10 agencies did this, suddenly we have $1 billion cut out of our deficit. That is enormous. If you want to read more of this article, and of course any other story that I'm talking about, you can of course find links to them in the description box below. I'm actually very proud of Mulvaney for doing this, and for considering the taxpayer dollars so scrupulously. This is not a small thing. It's small as far as, the amount of money it is, but it also marks the first time in 16 years, as far as I've seen, in which an agency has said, we have the money we need, you can put this money towards something, you can put the money that would normally be allocated to us towards something else. And I would be very proud to see that this kind of thing continue. Gotta skip ahead to our next story, sorry. Our next story, of course, is something much bigger. This is something that came out late Thursday night and took Twitter especially by storm. You may have noticed on Twitter that there was a hashtag release the memo, that came up and climbed up the trending ranks very quickly, and it was averaging about 260,000 tweets per hour on the subject, because what had happened is a memo about the FISA courts came out and was voted on by the House Intelligence Committee to be released to the House of Representatives at large. And while this hasn't made it to the public, a lot of people came out doing their damnedest to say that this memo needs to be released to the public. It was a 4-page memo detailing extensive abuses of the FISA court, or Foreign Intelligence Service court, that was made available to the House of Representatives, relating to the now infamous anti-Trump dossier, which was used by the FBI to obtain FISA warrants for spying on Donald Trump and his associates. This is remarkably reminiscent of the Watergate scandal, a time back in 1973, don't quote me on that year, in which 5 men broke into the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate office complex to photograph campaign documents and install listening devices into telephones, as well as the Nixon administration's attempts to cover up its involvement through the destruction of records. Sarah Carter, an independent journalist, broke the story with unnamed sources, and soon after, Representatives Matt Gaetz and Mark Meadows spoke on the House floor on C-SPAN as well as on Fox News, expressing that they want an immediate vote on the public release of this 4-page memo. Many representatives on the Intelligence Committee took to Twitter to push a hashtag release the memo, sharing what little they were permitted to, and expressing their concern about what was discovered in reading the memo, and how it pertains to the Russian collusion narrative, with Representative Gaetz saying that this blows the Robert Mueller investigation completely out of the water, if not makes it completely unnecessary. While this story became buried under fears of the government shutdown on Friday, with the Trump administration and Schumer's minority leadership forgive me, my tongue is tied today, I am so sorry. With the Trump administration and Schumer's minority leadership in the Senate publicly clashing and pointing fingers and accusing one another of being the cause, this memo is far more important than the government shutdown is with regards to the severe corruption that we've been seeing for the last years in our government. To go to the stories, I'm going to start with Sarah Carter's original article about the subject, in which she says, a review of a classified document outlining what is described as extensive Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act abuse was made available to all House members Thursday, and the revelations could lead to the removal of senior officials in the FBI and Department of Justice, several sources with knowledge of the document stated. Now, if you know me, you know I hate unnamed sources, and sources close to the matter, or sources with knowledge, because that doesn't tell me anything. However, this is related to an Intelligence Committee document, which means it's classified. There's a legitimate reason for her to be concealing the identities of these people, because these people could be arrested just for talking about it. These sources say the report is explosive, stating that they would not be surprised if it leads to the end of Robert Mueller's special counsel investigation into President Trump and his associates. House Intelligence Committee passed the motion along party lines Thursday to make the classified report alleging the extensive FISA abuse related to the controversial dossier available to all House members. The report contains information regarding the dossier that alleges President Trump and members of his team colluded with the Russians in the 2016 presidential election. Where was I? Some members of the House viewed the document in a secure room on Thursday. Representative Peter King, a Republican from New York, offered the motion on Thursday to make the Republican majority authored report available to the members. The document shows a troubling course of conduct, and we need to make the document available so the public can see it, said a senior government official, who spoke on condition of anonymity due to the sensitivity of the document. Once the public sees it, we can hold the people involved accountable in a number of ways. Now, I want you to take into account that the people involved would be Christopher Steele, the UK spy who helped put this dossier together, Fusion GPS, who was paid by the Clinton Foundation to push this dossier as fact when it was in fact evidenced that it was completely false in so many places, and the Obama administration for using the FBI and Department of Justice to pursue this document. Over the past year, whistleblowers in the law enforcement and intelligence community have revealed to Congress what they believe to be extensive abuse with regard to FISA surveillance, as previously reported. But the dossier was used in part as evidence for a warrant to surveil members of the Trump campaign. Former British spy Christopher Steele, who compiled the dossier in 2016, was hired by embattled research firm Fusion GPS. The firm's founder, Glenn Simpson, a former Wall Street reporter who had already testified before Congress relating to the dossier. In October, the Washington Post revealed for the first time that it was the Hillary Clinton campaign and the DNC that financed Fusion GPS. We'll probably, and here's the most important part, an important part of this story, we will probably get this stuff released by the end of the month, stated a congressional member who asked not to be named. It's extremely important to recognize that even if they voted on this right now, right? Even if they had voted on this on Thursday or Friday to publicly release the memo, there would be a 5-day gap between that vote and the release in order to give the White House time to object. as is standard process. Not that I suspect the Trump administration would object, but the soonest we would be able to see this is the end of next week. However, it's far more likely that it will be the end of this month. The House vote to make the report available to all members is a major step in exposing the long-guarded classified documents obtained by the House Intelligence Committee over the past year. It allows members of the House to view the report and could quickly lead to a motion to declassify the report for the public, numerous House members told the reporter. It's a House Intelligence Committee document that deals with the assessment on the Department of Justice, FBI, and the oversight work that is being conducted by the committee, said a congressional source, which spoke on the condition that they not be named. Of course, as Zero Hedge will show you, every Republican representative, I should say, was all over Twitter after 5 p.m. on January 18th in order to make sure people knew that this shit need to be heard. And I really want to spend time with just 2 of them, excuse me, while we're doing this. This is Representative Mark Meadows on C-SPAN. If it will fucking play, please.
Exactly what has taken place.
No, sorry. Fucking, I'm being an idiot tonight. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As many of you know, we have had a Russian narrative that has been going on because of an infamous dossier. And while there's been much reported on it, I can tell you that the Intel Committee has been fast at work, and Chairman Nunes has been doing outstanding work to get to the truth for the American people. Today, I had the opportunity to go into a confidential setting to make sure that what we can do is understand better what actually took place. And I'm here to tell all of America tonight that I am shocked to read exactly what has taken place. I would think that it would never happen in a country that loves freedom and democracy like this country. It is time that we become transparent in all of this, and I am calling on our leadership to make this available so that all Americans can judge for themselves. And I yield back.
And shortly after that, we had Representative Matt Gaetz on, Matt Gaetz on Fox News, who was thoroughly angry about the situation.
The allegations contained in this important intelligence document go to the very foundations of our democracy, and they require an immediate release to the public, in my opinion. Unfortunately, I cannot talk about the specific facts contained within this memo. I can only share my observation that if the American people knew what was happening, if they saw the contents of this memo, a lot would become clear about the information that I've been talking about on television for the last several months. And so I am calling on our leadership to immediately hold a vote on the floor of the House to make public the key contents of this intelligence memo regarding the FBI, the Department of Justice, and President Trump.
Would you recommend, in calling for this vote, that it supersede the vote on the continuing resolution tonight, be part of it? How would that work?
We could do them simultaneously. At any time, the leadership could put on the floor a measure that would allow us to release to the public the critical allegations, and I cannot stress how important they are in this memo. And they could put that on the floor at any time. They could do it simultaneous with the continuing resolution or immediately before or after.
I know you cannot discuss the top secret contents, but can I ask you a general question? Does it, I guess, articulate some type of horrific privacy abuses on American citizens?
Well, I cannot discuss the specifics that are contained in the memo, but folks who've been paying attention and watching what Congressman Jordan and Congressman DeSantis and others have been talking about on television and in the Judiciary Committee would likely find the contents of this memo very interesting, very revealing, and just essential to the way our government interacts with the duly elected President of the United States. This is no small measure. It is just as important as keeping the government open through the weekend, and we need to have a vote on it immediately.
As you can see, this is just 2 senators representatives out of what became a list of 65 Republican lawmakers pushing for the release of this memo. Just yesterday, Matt Gaetz, the man we were just watching, actually published a letter with 65 lawmakers' signatures to Representative Devin Nunes, chairman of the Intelligence Committee, requesting the immediate release of that memo. Despite the fact that the story became buried under fears of the government shutdown, releasing the memo would still require a committee vote, which approved, would still require 5 days for the White House to possibly give objection before it could be released. In addition, WikiLeaks has also put out a $1 million bounty on this FISA memo, hoping to leak it if the House of Representatives fails to release it to the public. And the contents of that letter can be seen right here. I'm going to read it for you. Dear Chairman Nunes, thank you for your hard work as chairman of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and for making the recent 4-page memo from HPSCI available to members of Congress. After reading the document, we were shocked and frustrated, but it has deepened our belief in the vital importance of transparency. This important memo will be of interest to anyone who cares about America and our democratic system of government. We are writing to request the immediate release of this document to the public, as well as any relevant ancillary information. The audience of this document should not be limited to members of Congress. The American people deserve to know the information it contains. Thank you for your service and your prompt attention to this request. Sincerely, Matt Gaetz. And the 65 congressmen include Babin, Bacon, Banks, Bergman, Biggs, Bloom, Bratt, Buckshon, Budd, Burgess, Byrne, Carter, Chabot, Davidson, Davis, Desjardins, Duncan, Farenthold, Garrett, Gibbs, Gomertz, Gosar, Griffith, Guthrie, Harris, Heiss, Hollingsworth, Hudson, Holtgren, Issa, Johnson, Jim Jordan, another person who was all over Twitter about this. Where was I? David Joyce, Mike Kelly, Steve King, Raul Labrador, Doug Lamborn, Robert Latta, Barry Loudermilk, Tom McClintock, Mark Meadows, who we discussed before, Luke Messer, Alex Mooney, Dan Newhouse, Christy Noam, Ralph Norman, Stephen Palazzo, Gary Palmer, Scott Perry, Ted Poe, Jim Renacci, Phil Rowe, Dana Rohrabacher, Francis Rooney, Mark Sanford, James Sensenbrenner, Lloyd Schmucker, Claudia Tenney, Mimi Walters, Randy Weber, Bruce Westerman, Roger Williams, Ted Yoho, and Lee Zedlin. I might have missed a few in there. I feel like I missed a couple in there, but either way, that is, you don't normally see a letter in the House of Representatives like this with 65 signatures. 10 signatures tends to be all you need to get it heard. 30 signatures means that it's extremely important. 65 signatures? Well, that is a large chunk of the 435 representatives, all demanding that this be shown to the public. And if it is shown, I will be doing an entire show breaking down the contents of that FISA memo. However, this isn't the only thing Hillary Clinton has to worry about this week, because we've run into even more information regarding the corruption with the Clinton Foundation. Michael Smith, a retired police detective and active Australian investigative journalist, was asked by the FBI this week to provide details about the mishandling of millions of dollars contributed to the Clinton Foundation by the Australian government. The complaints add up to over $88 million in Australian tax dollars. paid to the Clinton Foundation under false advertising for HIV and AIDS services in Papua New Guinea, as well as other false claims made as far back as 2006 regarding the Clinton Climate Initiative and Global Carbon Capture and Storage Institute. This, in addition to the anti-Trump dossier and collaboration between the Clinton Foundation and Obama administration to use financial and intelligence tools to spy on a presidential candidate, have left Clinton in an extremely difficult position after lie is exposed. Unfortunately, I had a lot of trouble finding, much like other important stories, I had a lot of trouble finding sources on this article. But I did find one from LifeZet, an Australian magazine news site, which is pretty decent. I have been asked to provide the FBI with further and better particulars about the allegations regarding improper donations to the Clinton Foundation, funded by Australian taxpayers, Michael Smith told LifeZet. At the center of Smith's complaints are former President Bill Clinton, former Secretary of State and 2016 Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton, and multiple Australian government officials, including senior diplomat Alexander Downer, the government's High Commissioner to the United Kingdom. Downer hit U.S. headlines recently when he was reported to have told the FBI of a May 2016 conversation he had with George Papadopoulos, then a campaign aide to President Donald Trump. Downer told U.S. law enforcement officials that Papadopoulos told him Russia had dirt on Hillary Clinton. However, the New York Times claimed in its December 30th, 2017 story that the information Downer gave the FBI was a major factor in the Bureau's decision to investigate allegations of collusion between Russian interests and the Trump campaign. But Papadopoulos pled guilty to lying to the FBI last year. In other words, this investigation is not only based on the lies of Fusion GPS, but also the lies of George Papadopoulos. The materials Smith is giving the FBI focus on a 2006 memorandum of understanding between the Australian government and the Clinton Foundation's Clinton HIV/AIDS initiative. Smith claims that the foundation received a $25 million advantage dishonestly obtained by deception as a result of actions by Bill Clinton and Downer, who was then Australia's Minister of Foreign Affairs. Also included in the Smith materials are evidence he believes shows corrupt October 2006 backdating of false tender advertisements purporting to advertise the availability of a $15 million contract to provide HIV and AIDS services in Papua New Guinea on behalf of the Australian government, after an agreement was already in place to pay the Clinton Foundation and/or associates. A third complaint concerns what Smith describes as the $10 million financial advantage dishonestly obtained by deception between April 1, 2008 and September 25, 2008 at Washington, D.C., New York City, New York, and Canberra, Australia, involving an MOU between the Australian government, the Clinton Climate Initiative, and the purported Global Carbon Capture and Storage Institute. A spokesman for the Clinton Foundation did not respond to LifeZet's request for comment on early Tuesday. The Clinton Foundation has had one problem after another in the past God knows how many weeks. It has been utterly insane, the number of stories that come out, but unfortunately, most of those stories go by the wayside. Mainstream media doesn't want to talk about the corruption that the Clinton Foundation has engaged in, the downright criminal acts and stealing of taxpayer dollars through false advertising and outright lies that have empowered it to do things such as destroy Haiti from the inside out, providing special benefits to Hillary Clinton's brother, Tony Rodham, allowing him to own most of Haiti's gold mines, in addition to the number of other things that are going on with it. And if you want to know, go look up Pizzagate, because even if you don't believe in the Pizzagate narrative, everything surrounding it is remarkably questionable. the amount of criminal activity in Haiti, in Pakistan, in other third world countries that the Clinton Foundation is a part of, is directly funding, make them, in my eyes, public enemy number one in the United States. And of course, there's one more article on this story from the Zero Hedge in the description box below. But most of it is covering the exact same information. If you want a better source, the Zero Hedge article is most certainly a better source to go to. Though there are a few interesting notes to put in here, such as the Australian government announced they would stop pouring millions of dollars into accounts linked to Clinton charities as of November of 2016, right after Hillary Clinton lost the election. Norway, coincidentally, reduced its $20 million a year donations to the Clinton Foundation right after Hillary's loss. Now, when the spokesperson for the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade was asked why the Clinton Foundation was chosen as a recipient of Australian taxpayer dollars, he said that all funding was used solely for agreed development projects, and that Clinton charities have a proven track record in helping developing countries, something we all know isn't true. That said, the road is getting very thin, much thinner for the Clinton Foundation and Bill and Hillary Clinton themselves. There's a lot less rope, and eventually all these lies are going to hang them. I suspect when this FISA memo comes out, it's going to roll back all the way to the Obama administration and Justice Department, the Hillary Clinton's State Department, as well as Bill Clinton's illegal dealings throughout the world. It's going to be a very interesting month, though I suspect we won't see anything more come out about this until February. On a different note, there was a very interesting story this week that I was laughing about. And that is the fact that California is discussing splitting up again. However, unlike the previous times California attempted to divide itself, this actually looks like it has a chance of going through. Robert Paul Preston and Tom Reed, in association with 17 rural and suburban counties in California, released a Declaration of Independence on Tuesday, expressing their desire to separate from the state of California and become their own state within the United States, much in the same way West Virginia separated from Virginia in 1863. Preston described California as ungovernable, citing high taxes, poor education, and a continually worsening business climate as reasons for rural California to separate from the coastal cities of San Francisco and Los Angeles, as well as the stretch of counties along the coast connecting those two cities. If the new California movement is to succeed, it will take 30 counties. It wishes to take 30 counties with it for its governing, and it would drop California from the largest electoral voter position and highest population states, leaving it with 17 million citizens and taking 20 million citizens with it. 2 new senators would need to be appointed for the new state, and approximately 30 of California's representatives and electoral votes would go to New California, making Texas the largest electoral college state and New California the second largest. The New California founders, Robert Preston and Tom Reed, are interacting with county commissions to garner their support, but already have the support of major counties, including Orange County, the highest population county outside of the coastal counties, which they want to separate from, and Mendocino County, the primary location for marijuana farmers in California. And here is the actual website for New California, which describes quite a lot of things. And I wanted to read you this declaration document because it's quite fascinating. With faith, diligence, our sacred honor, we do hereby declare our unity with natural law and the United States of America's Constitution. We stand firm in our pledge to maintain and support the freedoms of the people of our nation and New California at all times, at home and abroad. With God as our witness, honoring the foundational principles, we take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, to stand together as free citizens of New California, to be a sovereign state of that nation which we hold dear, the United States of America. As we seek to remain a member of our union, in order to form a more perfect union, we resolve to create the free, sovereign, and independent state of New California, due to the past and current government of California having failed in their oath of office, obligations, and responsibilities as representatives of we the people, to provide a republican form of government as guaranteed by Article 4, Section 4 of the United States Constitution. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, prosperity, and the pursuit of happiness. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, they should declare the causes which cause them to separate. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such design that it most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience has shown mankind is more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. However, when a long train of abuses and acts to seize and hold the people's power without legal authority, and pursuing invariably the same object that clearly demonstrates a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty, to throw off such government, and to provide new guards for their future security. The history of the present governor and government of California is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of a tyranny over the counties of New California and the state of California. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to seek a constitutional remedy to the abuse of powers. We, the people of the counties of New California, solemnly publish and declare that these counties are, and of right ought to be, a free and independent state, that we strive to be free from the state of California, and that as a free and independent state, have the full power to establish and maintain law and order, to promote general prosperity, and to do all other acts and things which an independent New California state may rightfully do. We, therefore, the representatives of the counties of New California, appeal to the California Legislature and the Federal Congress to pass resolutions to create the state of New California. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And of course, this has been very controversial in California amongst other places, because, for one, this isn't the first time California has attempted to split up. Just last year, there was a plan to divide California into 3 states, and back in 2013, there was a plan to divide California into 6 states. However, none of them have been as legally effective as the New California movement has been. With the support of 17 counties and moving into more counties, the state of New California has been repeatedly stating that they wish to follow the Article 4, Section 3 with regards to forming a new state or becoming a new state, which is something the other plans to divide California up had never done. Now, for those of you who don't know, Article 4, Section 3, do I have that link? I don't think I have that link open. The entire text of the article is down below. However, what it basically states is that that America can add new states. However, new states cannot be formed by 2 states coming together, nor can a state be formed out of fuck, I've got to look this up. I'm sorry. Let me just pop this page open right quick, because I know I've still got it open somewhere. Show up bookmarks. I know I have this open somewhere. It was... No, that's too far back. Just a second, I'm sorry. God damn it, where the fuck did it go? I just had this. Regardless, go look up Article 4, Section 3 and read it for yourself. It actually is quite strict as to the rules of how new states can be formed. And by following the West Virginia plan, New California is in a better position to do this than any other plan California has had in the past. That said, California has been under far more chaos than just that, because despite the interests in New California, Old California is absolutely necessary. Good God, I cannot talk tonight. I am so sorry, everyone. New California isn't the only concern that California has right now, as the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kirstjen Nielsen, has asked federal prosecutors to lodge criminal charges against sanctuary cities, of which California has 2, for refusing to cooperate with federal deportation efforts. Immigration and customs officials have already begun preparing a major sweep in San Francisco and other cities in Northern California, aiming to arrest between 1,500 and 5,000 known illegal immigrants working in and around the sanctuary city. California's Attorney General Xavier Becerra struck back, stating that any employers who cooperate with Immigration and Customs Enforcement would be prosecuted with violating California law, creating a legal catch-22 for corporations regardless of having hired illegal immigrants or not. Becerra plans on prosecuting under California's 2-month-old law, AB 450, which prohibits employers from discriminating based on immigration status, which served as a follow-up to Governor Jerry Brown's executive orders, which created official sanctuary cities in California. From the article, Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen confirmed Tuesday that her department has asked federal prosecutors to lodge criminal charges against sanctuary cities that refuse to cooperate with federal deportation efforts. The Department of Justice is reviewing what avenues may be available, Ms. Nielsen told the Senate Judiciary Committee. Her confirmation came after California's new sanctuary law went into effect on January 1st, severely restricting cooperation in the state or any of its localities could offer. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Director Tom Homan says that those policies put his officers and local communities at more risk because they have to arrest illegal immigrants out in the community. Mr. Homan told the Washington Times last July that he wanted to see local officials charged as complicit in human smuggling if they shielded illegal immigrants through sanctuary policies. Mr. Homan repeated that demand in an interview with Fox News earlier this year, setting off a firestorm of criticism. Of course, that's the Washington Times angle. If you ask someone from San Francisco, they would describe it as such. U.S. immigration officials have begun preparing for a major sweep in San Francisco and other Northern Californian cities in which federal officers would look to arrest more than 1,500 undocumented people, while sending a message that immigration policy will be enforced in the sanctuary state, according to a source familiar with the operation. Officials at Immigration and Customs Enforcement declined to comment on Tuesday on plans for the operation. The campaign centered... Don't stop it. Go away. The campaign, centered in the Bay Area, could happen within weeks and is expected to become the biggest enforcement action of its kind under President Trump, said the source. Trump has expressed frustration at the sanctuary laws, which seek to protect immigrants and persuade them not to live in the shadows by restricting cooperation between local and federal authorities. This is the exact... Yeah, they absolutely restrict cooperation between local and federal authorities. And that's the problem we're seeing here. California has itself in a severe problem. And it's only been made worse by the Attorney General of California, who says that employers who cooperate with federal immigration raids will be prosecuted. Becerra held a press conference following the reports that ICE officials are preparing for a major sweep in San Francisco and other Northern California cities, stating, U.S. immigration officials have begun preparing a major sweep in San Francisco and other North California cities, in which federal officers would look to I've already said this, sorry. But moving on, there are new laws in place in California now in 2018 with the advent of 2018. I mentioned two of them specifically, AB 450 and SB 54. AB 450 in particular deals with the workplace and how we go about treating information about the workplace and employees at the workplace. What we're trying to make sure is that employers are aware that in 2018 there's a new law in place. But Becerra then told the reporters gathered that ignorance of the law is not a defense. The reporter followed up by asking if Becerra's office would prosecute employers found to be in violation of AB 450. We will prosecute those who violate California law, the Attorney General responded. Of course, you might be wondering what AB 450 is, and the Legislative Council's digest is as follows. Existing law prohibits an employer or other person or entity from engaging in or directing another person or entity to engage in unfair immigration-related practices against a person for exercising specified rights. That's some legal bullshit if you ask me. Existing law defines unfair immigration-related practices for these purposes. Existing law grants the Labor Commissioner access to places of labor and authorizes the Commissioner to conduct investigations and prosecute actions in relation to the prescribed duties of the office. Existing law creates Labor Enforcement and Compliance Fund, monies in which, upon appropriation by the legislature, are available to support the Division of Labor Standards enforcement. This bill would impose various requirements on public and private employers with regards to federal immigration agency immigration worksite enforcement actions. Except as otherwise required by federal law, the bill would prohibit an employer or other person acting on the employer's behalf from providing voluntary consent to an immigration enforcement agent to enter non-public areas of a place of labor unless the agent provides a judicial warrant, except as specified. And we're going to stop right there. Essentially what we're seeing here is California finding a very specific legal loophole by which they can exercise their state rights to fuck over federal immigration laws and immigration enforcement agents. You'll note nowhere in there do they mention the word illegal immigrants, undocumented immigrants, or undocumented peoples. They only describe it as unfair immigration-related practices. This is some grade A legalese, if you ask me, because it's absolute insanity. They have created a situation in which employers are placed in a catch-22. Because if they knowingly or unknowingly hire illegal immigrants, and those immigrants are working in their place of business, and ICE comes along without a warrant, it's not the ICE agents who are in trouble. It's the corporations, the private corporations. And if these corporations agree with the immigration laws and immigration standards, well, then California only more so wishes to bill them $2,000, $5,000 for a first violation, and up to $10,000 for each subsequent violation. California is doing everything in its power to become the tyranny that they so vocally fight against. And this is a huge problem for all of us because it sets a standard that is going to end up in federal courts. We're going to have to watch this shape out in legal battles that are going to take place starting next month as soon as ICE goes out there, in addition to ICE having to go to courts and obtain thousands of federal warrants for investigation in situations which they normally wouldn't. And while I'm not a huge fan of government overreach, the fact of the matter is these people, they take American tax dollars. Approximately 63% of immigrants have jobs that pay less than the federal living wage, and as such don't pay taxes and are eligible for Social Security benefits, state security benefits, food stamps, and all of the services which California, a state that operates at a severe deficit, funds through federal loans and federal funding. California is taking advantage of the United States, and nothing makes me happier than the idea that they might lose all of their power to New California, splitting away and saying, nope, we want to be the next Texas, not the victims of your governmental tyranny within the states. This brings us to my last story, another story, well, not my last story, my second to last story. My last story is going to be a reading, as it usually is. But the Swedish Prime Minister is considering martial law after a long string of Muslim and drug-related gang shootings in Sweden across the last 6 months. Prime Minister Stefan Löfven announced on Wednesday that he is considering sending in the army to restore law and order after the shootings had risen 300% in 2017. This comes after the gang-related murder of a 20-year-old man in Malmö last weekend, and the death of a man who picked up a live hand grenade outside of a subway station at the beginning of the year. Until last year, crime in Sweden had been reported to be on a slight downward trend. However, the leader of the Swedish Democrat Party, Jimmy Åkesson, made a sarcastic remark in Parliament on Wednesday, saying, "This is the new Sweden, the new, exciting, dynamic, cultural paradise that so many in this assembly have fought to create for so many years." Sweden has taken in over 75,000 immigrants, asylum seekers, and refugees each year since 2013, in a time when population growth averages only 88,000 new locally born citizens per year. An official report by the Swedish Pensions Agency calculated that the total immigration to Sweden was expected to be 180,000 individuals for 2017, with the expectation of 110,000 every year after. And if you do the math, Subtracting 75,000 immigrants from 180,000, you can see Sweden is already trying to cut back on the number of refugees and asylum seekers that they take in because it's becoming more than they're able to handle. Immigration has, of course, created a surge in drug and rape crimes in Sweden, in part due to the way crimes are reported, but also due to the severe hands-off process they've taken, choosing to not enforce laws when Muslim immigrants have committed them, with one case stating that they were going to allow a Muslim shooter to get off scot-free because he said he didn't realize that pulling the trigger would fire a bullet and kill the person. Gee, I wonder if that's true or not. But going to the news article, Sweden will do whatever it takes, including sending in the army, to end the wave of gang violence that has seen a string of deadly shootings, Prime Minister Stefan Löfven said on Wednesday. Sweden's murder rate is relatively low in international terms, but gang violence has surged in recent years, and Swedes are worried that police are unable to cope. In 2016, the last year for which official records are available, 106 people were murdered in Sweden, in a country of 10 million. But Swedish TV reported there were over 300 shootings, mostly in turf battles between gangs over drugs, protection rackets, and prostitution. 4 people were shot dead in the first week of this year. One man died after picking up a hand grenade outside of a subway station in a suburb of Stockholm. Law and order is likely to be a major issue in a parliamentary election scheduled for September, with the populist opposition Sweden Democrats linking public concern about the rising crime rate to a large increase in the number of immigrants. It would not be my first option to bring in the military, but I am prepared to do whatever is necessary to make sure that serious, organized crime is stamped out, Löfven told the news agency TT. The government promised an extra 7.1 billion crowns, approximately $880 million, through 2020, toughened laws on gun crimes, and made it easier for the police to monitor private phone calls and emails, among other measures. But a report by the Swedish National Council for Crime Prevention shows increasing numbers of Swedes are worried about crime, with confidence failing in the police and judicial system. People are shot to death in pizza restaurants. People are killed by hand grenades they find on the street, Sweden Democrat leader Jimmy Åkesson said in Parliament on Wednesday. This is the new Sweden, an exciting, dynamic, multicultural paradise that so many here in this assembly have fought to create for so many years, he said sarcastically. Åkesson, of course, mooted the idea of Swedish armed forces being deployed to tackle the rising violent crime, according to Omni News. The suggestion was opposed by MPs, including Justice Minister Morgan Johansson. Citing Swedish statistics, the government said crime has been on a downward trend over the last 25 years. However, lethal violence involving firearms has increased between warring criminal gangs. And one thing you'll notice about all of these stories, as everyone refuses to mention the actual Muslim element of these organized gangs, and the fact that some of these organized gangs have developed in protection against the Muslim immigrants. The situation in Sweden is rapidly growing out of control, and this is something that I've talked with my friends a lot about. It's extremely concerning, it's extremely depressing. And, I mean, most of the Swedes that I know are terrified to be proud of being Swedish. In Sweden, you can be called a Nazi if you even wave the Swedish flag, let alone express a distaste for the, as Åkesson calls it, New Sweden. And if you show any sort of populism or nationalism, you are set as persona non grata. It breaks my heart, but it seems like we are seeing the disintegration of Sweden as we once knew it. and we are moving to a time in which Sweden has no choice for the decisions that they have made, but to become the authoritarian nightmare that can actually protect its citizens. And of course, you can read more about this, and there are more links to this down below in the description box. But there's one last story that I want to finish with, and I'm mostly just going to be reading and commenting, because this is something that affects absolutely all of us. I don't know how many of you realize this, but the Chinese government has invested and provided funding for over 500 universities worldwide, of which 100 are in the United States, through the Confucius Institute program. The Confucius Institute's goals are stated to be to establish buildings within universities which help students become better equipped to succeed in an increasingly globalized world through the teaching of the Chinese language, history, and culture. However, this is just outright bullshit, as back in 2011, a member of the Chinese Politburo stated, "The Confucius Institute is an appealing brand for our culture abroad. It has made an important contribution toward improving our soft power." In 2010, the People's Daily ran an article describing the purpose of the Confucius Institute, and it stated as follows: "Coordinating the efforts of overseas and domestic propaganda and further creating a favorable international environment for the Chinese." American universities collect tuition from their students as well as funding from China, with the Chinese government providing instruction on what the students are to see and not see, including DVDs which the Chinese give on the subject of the Chinese narrative on Tibet, as well as websites run by the Chinese government which only produce propaganda. This is an extremely important story in light of situations coming out of Evergreen and Wilfrid Laurier University, and I really believe that this story needs to be heard. Last year, the University of North Carolina at Charlotte made an announcement to great fanfare. The university would soon open a branch of the Confucius Institute, the Chinese government-funded educational institutions that teach Chinese language, culture, and history. The Confucius Institute would help students be better equipped to succeed in an increasingly globalized world, says Nancy Gutierrez. Excuse me. UNC Charlotte's Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, and broaden the university's outreach and support for language instruction and cultural opportunities in the Charlotte community. But the Confucius Institute's goals are a little less wholesome and edifying than they sound, and this is by the Chinese government's own account. A 2011 speech by a standing member of the Politburo in Beijing laid out the case. The Confucius Institute is an appealing brand for expanding our culture abroad, Li Shangshun said. It has made important contributions toward improving our soft power. The Confucius brand has a natural attractiveness. Using the excuse of teaching Chinese language, everything looks reasonable and logical. Li, it now seems, was right to exult. More than a decade after they were created, Confucius Institutes have sprouted up at more than 500 college campuses worldwide, with more than 100 of them in the United States, including the George Washington University, University of Michigan, and University of Iowa. Overseen by a branch of the Chinese Ministry of Education known colloquially as Hanban, the institutes are part of a broader propaganda initiative that the Chinese government is pumping an estimated $10 billion into annually, and they have only been bolstered by growing interest in China among American college students. Yet along with their growth have come consistent questions about whether the institutes belong on campuses that profess to promote free inquiry. Confucius Institutes teach a very particular Beijing-approved version of Chinese culture and history, one that ignores concerns over human rights, for example, and teaches that Taiwan and Tibet are indisputably belonging to mainland China. Take it from the aforementioned Li, who also said in 2009 that Confucius Institutes are an important part of China's overseas propaganda setup. Critics also charge that the centers have led to a climate of self-censorship on campuses that play host to them. Despite years of these critiques, including a recent outcry at the University of Massachusetts at Boston and the shuttering of Confucius Institutes at 2 of the nation's top research universities, they're still growing in number in the United States, albeit at a slower clip than a few years ago. Several opened on American campuses last year, and vanishingly few schools have rethought the institutes and closed them, suggesting that once they're implanted, they are entrenched. At several campuses, they're actually expanding their footprints with bigger facilities and new courses. I contacted more than a half-dozen Confucius Institutes, and several officials said in interviews that they're not looking back. Others declined to comment or simply ignored me, further suggesting commitment to keeping the institutes going. The Chinese embassy in Washington also did not respond to a request to comment by publication time. There are so many universities that have welcomed Confucius Institute with open arms, points to another disturbing trend in American higher education, an alarming willingness to accept money at the expense of principles that universities are ostensibly devoted to upholding. At a time when universities are willing as ever to shield their charges from controversial viewpoints, some nonetheless welcome foreign, communist propaganda, if the price is right. Coordinate the efforts of overseas and domestic propaganda and further create favorable international environments for us, Chinese Minister of Propaganda Liu Yunshan exhorted his compatriots in a 2010 People's Daily article. With regards to key issues that influence our sovereignty and safety, we should actively carry out international propaganda battles against issuers such as Tibet, Xinjiang, Taiwan, human rights, and Falun Gong. We should do well in establishing and operating overseas cultural centers and Confucius Institutes. Liu's orders have been heeded. The first Confucius Institute opened in South Korea in 2004. This quickly spread to Japan, Australia, Canada, and Europe. The United States, China's biggest geopolitical rival, has been a particular focus. Fully 40% of Confucius Institutes are stateside. In addition to the institutes at universities, Hanban also operates hundreds of so-called Confucius classrooms in primary and secondary schools. Let's take a break for just a second and talk about the impacts of this. China is literally infiltrating schools and taking control of educational plans because these schools need money. This is absolutely disturbing and is a huge sign of what is to come, as they create an environment through their propaganda that is welcoming to them, no matter how egregious their human rights abuses, their lies, their propaganda may be. They are raising our children and our young adults to believe things about the world that are completely untrue, in the same way that the people in China are forced to believe these things. How long will it be before you aren't allowed to speak about the Tiananmen Square massacre in colleges? This is an important question to consider as we continue going through this article. Beijing treats this project seriously, as evidenced by who runs the show. Hanban, shorthand for the ruling body of the Office of Chinese Language Council International, a branch of the Ministry of Education, is classified technically as a non-profit agency, but it is dominated by communist Chinese officialdom. Representatives from 12 top state agencies, including the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the State Press and Publishing Administration, and a propaganda bureau, sit on its executive council. Hanban's Director General is on the Chinese State Council, the 35-member board that basically runs the country. Hanban has been shrewd in compelling universities to host Confucius Institutes. Marshall Salins, a retired University of Chicago anthropologist and author of the 2014 pamphlet Confucius Institutes, Academic Malware, reports that each Confucius Institute comes with $100,000 in startup costs provided by Hanban, with annual payments of the like over a 5-year period, and instruction subsidized as well, including the airfares and salaries of the teachers provided from China. Hanban also agrees to send textbooks, videos, and other classroom materials for these courses, materials that are often welcome in institutions without an important China studies program of their own. And each Confucius Institute typically partners with a Chinese university. They're kind of like restaurant franchises. Open the kit and you're in business. American universities can continue to collect full tuition from their students, while essentially outsourcing instruction in Chinese. In other words, it's free money for the schools. At many, though not all, Confucius hosting campuses, students can receive course credit for classes completed at the institutes. But the institutes go to some length to obscure their political purpose. There's the name, for example. Most Americans associate Confucius with wisdom or cutesy aphorisms. It's likely the centers would be less successful were they called Mao Institutes. The institutes also offer a plethora of fun classes, not for academic credit and often open to members of the general public, in subjects like dumpling making and Tai Chi. The Chinese teachers are thoroughly vetted by Hanban, according to Salin's reports. They must have a strong sense of mission, glory, and responsibility, and be conscientious and meticulous in their work, Hanban says. They're also explicitly instructed to toe Beijing's line on controversial political questions. There can be no discussion whatsoever of human rights in China or the Tiananmen Square massacre. Salins found that should a student raise an uncomfortable question about, say, the political status of Tibet, Hanban's instructors are ordered to refocus the discussion on, say, Tibet's natural beauty, or indigenous cultural practices, which, ironically, Beijing has spent decades stamping out. Matteo Macacci of the advocacy group International Campaign for Tibet requested a sampling of the Institute's course materials from a DC area university several years ago. Instead of scholarly materials published by credible American authors, not to speak of Tibetan writers, what we received were DVDs and books giving the Chinese narrative on Tibet, published by China and Intercontinental Press. He wrote in The Foreign Policy, which is described by a Chinese government-run website as operating under the authority of the State Council Information Office, whose main function is to produce propaganda products. If you'd like to read this article further, I'd love for you to, because it just gets worse and worse. However, at this point, he kind of repeats himself on the issue of propaganda, and this is unfortunately what we're seeing. If it's not propaganda from feminists and Marxists in universities, it's propaganda from Maoists and cultural, and Chinese officials. We are seeing a severe change in our country and across the world. And as much hope as so many people had at the beginning of this year, we have reached a point in which we are no longer able to see the original interests that people had, and instead it's all about the narrative that one group or another with money can spin. It's extremely depressing to see California, to see universities, to see so many different groups actively manipulated by propaganda. And that really is the story for today, isn't it? But China, above all, is doing their damnedest to make sure that their propaganda is heard, and heard at a young age, putting their Confucius classrooms in primary and secondary schools, which disgusts me to no end. But my fever is actually spiking up and I do not feel good at all. My throat is closing up and I'm going to have to cut the show short here. I'd like to thank you all for sticking with me. I know it's been a long show and I know I've covered a broad selection of topics, but I really hope that you learned something tonight and that you get information out of this show. And if you'd like to see the show keep going, there are links to my Patreon and Maker support down below. But more so, I would really like you to show some support for the Manatee County Men's Shelter run by the Salvation Army, because there are extremely limited men's shelters in this country. And as the propaganda war picks up and men are continually shot down by the Me Too movement, I think that we're going to be seeing more and more homeless men, and we're going to need men's shelters to protect them from the women that abuse them or outright disown them. I know it's depressing, but even a small donation goes an extremely long way for a homeless shelter, and I hope you consider donating to them. Again, if you missed the beginning of the show, I'm going to be doing news shows Monday to Friday, same general time frame, and they're going to be available as videos, afterwards. I'm not going to, lock up any videos or anything like that. But I really do hope I see you on, my weekday shows. And if I don't, it's alright. Because on Saturday, this show is going to be turning into more of a conversational show in which I talk with the audience. I realize I haven't spoken with you very much in this show, but that's because honestly, there's so much news that is coming out every week that I feel needs to be covered, that I am just pumping out going through my notes and going through my articles, which is why I'm going to be very happy to put forth a more interactive show. Now, if you have any questions right now, please ask them while I'm finishing up this statement so I can answer them right quick. I did see a couple questions. Curated Opinions asked how many lawmakers are required to sign so that it gets through. The House, the Senate Committee, the House Intelligence Committee is 30 members, and they require 16 for it to pass. That said, it has to be brought to a vote first, and the Democrats in the Intelligence Committee are going well out of their way. If this is brought up on a general House committee, they would require 51%, or 216 votes. 16? 217? 218? I think it's 218 votes. Don't quote me on that. But they would require 51%. Fuck it. Pulling open a calculator right quick. 435 times 0.51 is 221 votes. Let's call it 222. They would require 222 of the 435 U.S. representatives in order to make it public. The thing is, the House has a Republican majority right now, and they would absolutely get that. It has to be brought to a vote. And thank you all who are telling me you hope I feel better. I'm sweating up a storm in here with windows open and the coldest nights that Florida has seen in years. So I'm definitely going to be laying down for a while right after this. And by the way, I fucked up earlier in the show. I said Foreign Intelligence Service. What I meant was Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. I apologize for that as well. I realize I haven't been talking the best tonight. But you guys, as an audience, are the absolute best. I'm so thankful to have one of the most patient and thoughtful audiences that I know of on YouTube. Most YouTube audiences are nothing but spam, but you guys try and get involved with the discussion. And I haven't given you guys nearly enough of a chance to be involved with the discussion, which is why for my Monday to Friday show, they're going to be shorter shows. And if you comment on them, if you reply to my videos with questions, I will address them in my Saturday shows, as well as talking directly with the audience in the live chat. But for now, I absolutely need to go guzzle some fucking water and lay down. Maybe some hot tea. Actually, hot tea sounds wonderful. Yeah, I'm gonna go get some hot tea, and I hope you all have an absolutely wonderful night. Remember, there are a ton of links below if you want to read further into the stories that I was discussing today, and I hope you all have a wonderful night or morning, depending where you are. Bonsoir.